Great. Thank you, Kimberly. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, wherever you're joining. Hopefully, everyone who is registered for this webinar is already familiar with ORCID, but for those who aren't, you're very welcome. ORCID are an open infrastructure provider offering a unique persistent identifier for researchers to use, completely free of charge, of course, wherever and whenever they need to be disambiguated from researchers with the same or similar names. Alongside the ORCID identifier, researchers also benefit from using the ORCID record. This can be thought of as a digital CV or profile, and this helps them to be reliably connected with all of their research activities, their organizational affiliations, and research outputs. And thirdly, ORCID also offers a set of APIs. These are application programming interfaces, which allow organizations to integrate their systems with ORCID to exchange data back and forth with the ORCID records, with the record holder's permissions, of course. And this saves the researcher time and effort. It helps to reduce administrative burden and the chance of human error when manually inputting data. But most importantly, when organizations use the ORCID member API to write data to the ORCID records of their researchers, they add trust markers along with the provenance or the source of each item added to an ORCID record. So each record will always be a mixture of self-assertions and data added by trusted organizations. But over time, every record should accumulate more validated data as researchers interact with these ORCID integrated systems, making the record more useful to the researcher and also to decision makers at research organizations in the community, whether they're editors of journals, reviewers of funding applications, or university tenure committee members, for example. Because ORCID are a neutral, unbiased, non-profit membership organization open to participation by all, and because we are embedded throughout the global research ecosystem, not just among publishers, but also funders, universities, government agencies, etc., ORCID are uniquely placed to help organize and facilitate important discussions across different stakeholder groups and across organizations, which often cooperate but also compete against one another within these stakeholder groups in the research ecosystem. So bringing this back to the context of today's discussion, ORCID are delighted to be able to co-organize today's webinar with Yvonne from the OA Switchboard on this important topic of research integrity and best practices for creating and curating high quality publication metadata to support the needs of the global research community. And I'll pass over to Yvonne to speak about the OA Switchboard. Thanks.
Thanks, Shiv, and welcome to all of you. Maybe you joined a bit early and you saw a video animation that we co-developed with ORCID and others to illustrate how our global research system can only thrive when the building blocks are connected. Metadata enables those connections by revealing how people, organizations, and resources relate, and the foundation is already built, and that's what today's webinar is also about. What matters now is how to bring it all together, how to bring it to life, and that's something we can all contribute to. Few words on OA Switchboard and the Data Quality Challenge. You probably are aware, a simple shared infrastructure for global exchange of metadata. And we are built by and for the people who use it and is leveraged with existing PIDs such as DOI, ORCID, and ROAR. And over the years, since 2019, OA Switchboard has gained tremendous insight. First of all, adoption and traffic over the years. We have relayed 3.2 million messages, and 47 publishers are currently reporting through Switchboard. And by doing this, we've gained a lot of insights along the way, which has informed the Data Quality Challenge, which is an initiative by all parties, again, in the industry to try and collaborate and build on what we already have. Building community-wide lessons learned and best practices, and based on core values of trust, collaboration, and efficiency. And it is with this that I welcome our first speaker to talk about that. Carolina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me just... Okay, I think my screen is shared. Okay, good. Hello, I'm Carolina Taniguchi. I work in Cello. I work for the specific context of this webinar. I work with the online submission systems and Cello preprints. And yeah, Okay, this is a brief overview of our agenda. So we're going to talk a little bit about Cielo itself, the Cielo program. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the Cielo Brazil collection. We're going to talk a little bit about Cielo preprints, and then we're going to move on to some conclusions. Okay, so first things first, what is the Cielo program? The Cielo program is a research communication program that pioneered open access through national collections of nonprofit journals published by universities and scientific societies. It is implemented as a public policy and it is publicly funded. Since our 25 years conference in 2023, we've been operating under the Open Science with Idea banner, meaning impact, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Every Cielo national collection operates independently, but follow our publication model, which encompasses policies, methodologies, and technologies to run decentralized open science collections of research communication objects. Okay, so about the Cielo network, at a national level, Cielo is implemented as a public policy, one journal collection per country with a scientific advisory committee, each national collection focusing on the national priorities as a principle. And at a network level, it's an international technical cooperation program coordinated by the network secretariat that is currently being led by Cielo Mexico. Okay, so there are 18 national collections within the Cielo network, 15 of which are Latin American and the Caribbean. There are 2 collections in Europe and 1 in South Africa. Other than that, we have the Cielo Books collection. We have the Cielo Ethics Office that looks at any reports of possible malpractice and investigates them. And we have Cielo Preprints, which is a preprint server, and Cielo Data, which is a dataset server. This is just a print screen of our Cielo.org site, and you can see all of our collections, servers and repositories, and all that. Okay, so for some context, we're going to focus on the Cielo Brazil collection and Cielo preprints today. Our policies are defined by the Cielo Brazil criteria, which are updated every 2 years and approved by the Cielo Brazil Advisory Committee. This criteria is used as a baseline to guide journal admission and permanence in our Cielo Brazil collection and also serve as a reference document for other collections of the network. Okay, onto the Brazil collection. It started in 1997. We currently have 329 active journals across all areas of knowledge and over 5,000 indexed articles. Publication is through XML files, so journals have full control over their editorial activities and have to provide us with the XML compliant with the Cielo publishing schema, which is based in JATS, a PDF file of the article, and images if need be. So they are required to provide for all articles, ORCID for all authors, responsible editor, preferably area or section editor, but otherwise editor-in-chief is fine. They also have to provide us with data availability statement, dates submitted, revised, and accepted. There has to be a reference list that's properly marked and a DOI. They are also incentivized to collect and or provide the following, which is funding information, conflict of interest, preprint information, so whether that article has been published as a preprint previously or not, author contribution information, usually they use credit, AI usage declaration, demographic data, and peer review information. Some of this information, such as specifically demographic data, we recommend them to collect for reporting purposes, so they don't actually have / should put this information on the, share it publicly. Okay, so that is a lot. So how do we help our journals with that? First of all, we facilitate the use of submission systems, namely OJS and ScholarOne, which help collect authenticated and standardized data, such as ORCID, institutional affiliation, ROR if you're using OJS, or Ringgold if you're using ScholarOne, funding information, author contribution information. Both systems support credit, and this also goes in line with our objective of furthering professionalization for journals indexed in our collection. We also have an open science compliance form, which is just a doc file that journals can require authors to submit along with their article files, and that collects information on whether that has been published as a preprint, on data availability, and consent on open peer review practices. Okay, so we also offer our journals the option to have their DOIs deposited by us, and we cover this cost. They just have to let us know what's the URL. And we also have the Cielo preprint server, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And we have the Cielo data repository, which is a Dataverse server. in which every Cielo journal, regardless of the collection, can have their own dataverse and ask authors to deposit datasets, which will be assigned a DOI once published. Okay, so a little bit on Cielo preprints. We've been running for 6 years now, and we have over 5,000 preprints posted. It's based on OPS, Open Preprint Systems, which is developed and maintained by BKP. It is both part of our commitment to open science practices and serve as an option of preprint server for journals and authors. But why should authors choose to submit their works to Cielo preprints? Well, we accept submissions in Portuguese, Spanish, and English, and I would say this is one of the main reasons why we get so many submissions. All preprints are assigned a DOI. We interoperate with Cielo data via the Dataverse plugin. We also interoperate with ORCID, both in the submission process and upon posting, and we also use ORCID as a moderation tool. Okay, so you might notice that we require a lot more for authors submitting to Cielo preprints, and this is because this is a much more controlled environment, right? So we have a little bit more leeway in that regard. So we will require authors to provide their ORCIDs. We also use their ORCID records as a moderation tool, so we will look at their previous publications, and we're gonna use that for moderation. We also required a data availability statement, an author contribution information. Usually they use credit. There's also an integration with credit and OPS, so that's made easier. We required them to inform conflict of interest and approval of their institution's ethics committee when applicable. We've been incentivizing AI usage declaration and funding information, but we haven't been requiring that yet. Okay, so some of our challenges, this is more broadly, not specific to Cielo preprints, but specifically to the Cielo Brazil collection, because of the sheer size and diversity, things take time, right? So a lot of effort goes into getting journals to not only collect this metadata, but understand why it's important and want to do it. Editorial teams, because editorial teams have full control over the process, they have to then work with authors so that they can provide this information in the best way possible. This is also true for Cielo preprints and Cielo data, so we've been dealing directly with authors in that regard. And yeah, other than that, sometimes there are technical difficulties, whether that's some sort of platform or infrastructure limitation, or users that can be a little bit tech savvy, and sometimes they're trouble with getting emails to the and all that sort of thing. Okay, and finally, what are the outcomes of these practices? There's no such thing as a silver bullet, so having this metadata and information doesn't necessarily mean that a paper is solid and good science. However, we've found that requiring specific types of metadata help increasing transparency, which means that all the information is out there for researcher and other users and readers to find, which in turn facilitates informed decision-making, particularly in preprint moderation, as I just mentioned. And it also improves the quality of deposited metadata, which helps build trust in preprints, articles, and other research objects. And I think this is it. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, thanks for the invite.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carolina. If you have any questions for Carolina, we invite you to submit them via the chat, via the Q&A. And up next, we have Christian. Christian, if you want to go ahead and get your presentation ready.
We don't seem to be able to hear you, Christian. Apologies.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Much better now? Awesome.
Yes.
Okay. Computers. Yeah, my name is Christian Lange. I'm working for the Ballstein Institute as a scientific editor with the Ballstein journals, and I'm happy to present some of the metadata practices that we use for our Diamond Open Access journals. But before I go into the details, I'd just like to say a few words who we are and what we do. So the Ballstein Institute is actually a non-profit foundation based in Frankfurt am Main in Germany, and our mission is to support supporting the advancement of the chemical sciences. And this has not changed since 1951 when we were funded by the Max Planck Society, but the way in which we do this has certainly changed. And today we aim to support the scientific community by providing high quality information that is essential for chemistry and related research through long-term projects in which open science principles are the cornerstone of what we do. And this includes, among these projects, that we financially support to 100%. There are, for the direct communication of research results and for networking, 5 to 6 Ballstein symposia per year in all areas of chemical sciences on topics such as biochemistry, organic chemistry, nanoscience, and even beyond. And we have been doing this for over 25 years now. We also have a webinar series, the Ballstein Talks, which also covers topics including organic chemistry, nanoscience, and biochemistry. And two of the major open science projects where we invest most of our resources and energy are the flagship Diamond Open Access journals, the Ballstein Journal of Organic Chemistry and the Ballstein Journal of Nanotechnology, together with the preprint server, the Ballstein Archives. And there are some other projects regarding open standards. There's Strenda and Mirage, standards for glycomics and enzymology. We support Strenda with the Strenda database. Recently, we began to build up a chem informatics teams to support the further development of the INSHI project and other projects related to digital infrastructure and standards for the chemistry community. And in the most recent developments, we are looking to support open support software and community-led open digital infrastructure for chemistry with the Ballstein Chem Info Labs. And now to the metadata practices. I would like to begin with all the endpoints where we deliver metadata. These are, of course, ORCID and the open access switchboard. The ORCID profiles of authors are updated via Crossref, and with our upcoming release, we will write directly to the ORCID profiles of referees when they are doing peer review through the member API. And yes, and we use Open Access Switchboard to communicate our Diamond Open Access status to libraries and funders. There's also Crossref, of course, which is important, and we send all of our articles to PubMed Central, where we are part of the PMC Open Access subset. We are also part of the directory of Open Access journals, DOAJ, and last but not least, we deliver metadata on chemical structures to PubChem. We have the advantage that our manuscript tracking and publishing system is developed in-house. This gives us a lot of freedom, and all we need basically is an API and a corresponding documentation, and then we are good to go to implement whatever we like or think that we need. Our best practice in general include of course, metadata markup of article, HTML, and PDFs. We use the Dublin core vocabulary here. And for metadata of chemical structures, we include JSON LD in the HTML pages. We always aim to adopt the most current versions of schemas and APIs if this serves our purposes. So if newer versions allow for more metadata to be delivered, we aim to migrate pretty quickly. Because we aim to deliver that metadata to as many endpoints as possible, we strongly prefer the use of automated technologies such as APIs instead of file uploads. The PIDs of data repositories in the data availability statement of our articles become a validated machine-readable part of the article metadata, and I will show you later how we do this. Any piece of metadata that we deliver, in particular the PIDs and the chemical structure data, is verified and or validated by a human. And yeah, as I mentioned before, there is an approach to make chemical research data more fair by extracting chemical structures from our articles, generating chemical identifiers, SMILES and INSHI in our case, and delivering these to PubChem. All right, the examples. First one is the implementation of ORCID IDs in our publishing system, and for this we use the ORCID OAuth sign-in implementation as referenced on their website. So far we use this for our authors during manuscript submission, and as I said before, with the upcoming release, we are going to write directly, or we are going to credit peer reviewers for their work. And if they provide their ORCID to us, we will write this credit directly to their ORCID profile via the member API of ORCID. And the author's ORCID profiles are updated via Crossref auto update at the time being. Another very useful PID is the raw ID of author affiliations and of funders. And this is a screenshot of how this means the editorial staff during layout, maps the raw IDs to author affiliations. So you can hopefully see the string in the field affiliation search, and this string is automatically taken from the manuscript. And when query is clicked, this string is sent to the raw API, and which will return a list of results down to a certain score threshold, which you can see in the table below. And to make things easier for the editorial staff, some of the metadata of these raw entries are also shown: institution and country. The raw IDs themselves are hyperlinked in the table to quickly check them. And with this, the editorial staff can select the proper or corresponding and correct raw ID to the affiliation. And if the affiliation string is too messy or too cluttered to return a meaningful result from the API, at the first try, we can use this free text search field where we can copy paste stuff from the original string and refine our queries, so to say. And we do this likewise for the raw IDs of funders. Here, the authors provide plain text funder names, and we are running this loop also with the funder names and the raw API. As mentioned before, we also validate DOIs from the data availability statement, and this is how we do it in the screenshot. So if there are DOIs provided in the data availability statement, we extract them via pattern matching. And if we find some DOIs, we query them at the APIs of Crossref and DataSite to see if they are already registered. And if we can retrieve additional metadata to the DOIs, we present them to the authors as shown here with the title and the publisher. And then the authors are required to confirm whether this is really the data set that they were aiming to link with the article. And this also prevents any typos in the DOI, because a DOI with a typo in the data availability statement will not return a valid set of metadata here. And then we would ask the authors to check their input again. And the last example is a bit special. As I mentioned, we provide metadata for chemical structures, and this is a screenshot of the JSON LD in our HTML sources. What you see here is JSON LD from the scholarly article type of schema.org, which is the only resource so far to support this. And yeah, we use this to include the chemical structure data that we extract from the articles in our article HTML. And so far, we do not know of anyone else to include this information in article metadata, and we are quite happy that we achieved this. The outcome of our best practices, we would describe them as follows. So we can deliver curated and/or validated metadata. We can increase our visibility as a publisher, either to libraries and funders via Open Access Switchboard, or to the community via Crossref and PubMed Central. We can establish a connection to authors and referees via their ORCID profiles. We support data science and data mining via Crossref and PubMed Central. The metadata linkage to data repositories helps to support the verification of data. And we provide high quality machine readable open access chemical structure information, which we consider a positive contribution to future developments in chem informatics. The organizers asked about challenges that we might see regarding metadata. One technically is the fact that the schemas of different stakeholders are non-comprehensive and have different granularities, which makes them non-interoperable, which is sometimes an issue with mapping the stuff. We found that apart from schema.org, there's no place for domain-specific metadata, such as chemical information in our case. And we regularly have discussions with authors about the additional workload we impose on them by requesting additional data during submission and by making them check them over again during proofread and something like this. And we were also asked about a few general thoughts regarding metadata and research integrity. We think that currently the most pressing issue is the sheer number of submitted papers, of which many are fabricated. The problem here is that authors can easily maintain multiple email addresses and even ORCID IDs, which makes the unambiguous attribution of research output to a certain person difficult. And as I said before, authors might be reluctant to the increased workload. We have a regular unwillingness and or inability to comply to the ORCID OAuth sign-in by our authors. We are not quite sure why, but that's the case. And this all makes human supervision critical to guarantee research integrity and useful metadata. Just using technology will not suffice, and instead it is necessary to staff up research integrity departments. And that's it from my side, and I'm over the time. Yeah, thanks to the organizers for the invitation, and thank you all for your attention. And I'm looking forward to the Q&A session.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christian. If anyone has questions for Christian, do invite you to submit them via the Q&A now. I'm happy to hand it over to Fred from eLife Sciences.
Hello, can you hear me and see my screen?
Sure can.
Excellent. So thanks very much for inviting me here. I'm very pleased to be here. My name is Fred. I am head of production at eLife. By way of a sort of quicker introduction to eLife, it's an independent non-profit that's led by scientists and was tasked by its original founding funders to change scientific publishing for the better. We publish open access articles in the life and medical sciences. And in 2023, we launched a publish, review, curate model of publishing, whereby each version or revision of an article is published first as a reviewed preprint. And then the authors had the option to decide whether to publish their final version as a version of record at eLife. So a quick introduction to that model. We review only preprints. If a submission has not yet been posted as a preprint, then we can help facilitate posting that from the details that we collect at submission. Our editors consult and commit to review preprints where we have the required expertise and can sort of feel that we can most add value with public review. Then we carry out our consultative peer review process, and the output of that process is not an accept reject decision. This is the key sort of difference between this and a conventional sort of journal. Instead, editors and reviewers, they consult to write public reviews and an eLife assessment, which summarizes the significance of the work and the strength of the evidence within it. As I said before, each preprint version is that's reviewed is published as a reviewed preprint. That is a sort of intermediary format, which is a collation of the preprint, the eLife assessment, the reviews, and if the authors have a response to those reviews. And then the authors get to decide how they want to respond to the reviews, whether to revise their paper and ask for it to be re-reviewed, to proceed with publishing a version of record at eLife. They could take their paper to another journal to be published elsewhere if they like. The main thing we feel this model offers with respect to research integrity is transparency. Each version of the paper is published and made available publicly alongside the public reviews, and each has its own set of metadata that is deposited. So in terms of that metadata, and in the interest of time, I just wanted to mention three main sort of things that we capture and how we do so. The first is ORCID IDs. So at the VOR stage, we only capture authenticated ORCID IDs. These are those that the authors have signed in via ORCID auth. They're collected in our submission system and our proofing systems. We do this because it ensures provenance, both in the article and in their ORCID record, which we feel is an essential part of trust. It follows best practice for data protection. So we ask for explicit permission from those authors when we ask them to sign in to sort of interact with their record, and they know what permission is being requested, and they can also sort of deny that permission if they decide later to do so. Importantly, it avoids the potential for errors due to typos and copy-paste errors and so on. As I said, we also publish reviewed preprints. And for these, we currently collect a mix of authenticated and unauthenticated ORCIDs. This is mostly for pragmatic reasons. So when we originally set up the workflow, we're taking the content directly from the preprint server, and we're uncertain of the authenticated status of those ORCIDs, so we assume that they're all unauthenticated. We wanted to be able to reduce friction for authors under this scenario. So we also sort of see cases where there's a bit of friction with authors trying to sign in using the OAuth service. So we instead on our side implement automated and manual checks to ensure that they are actually indeed the ORCID, or they appear to be the ORCID record for the author. Very recently, we've implemented a workflow improvement to introduce the authenticated ORCIDs that we collect at submission. So we're at the point where we have a mix of unauthenticated and authenticated ORCIDs. You can see that in the screenshot on the left or below. We follow ORCID display guidelines, so only show the logo next to authenticated ORCID IDs. So we're now sort of considering whether to retain the unauthenticated ones or just to remove them. There is sort of one benefit of this process in that where we have a mix, we've sometimes found duplicate ORCIDs or incorrect ORCIDs for researchers. So perhaps there are benefits to keeping the current way of doing things. So secondly, I wanted to talk about RAWs. As Dollstein Institute, we capture RAWs for authors, editors, and reviewers. We capture these for affiliations in our submission system. Users are presented with a drop-down, as you can see in the screenshot here, to auto-complete their affiliation information. And it's a sort of fuzzy search, so it doesn't have to be an exact match. If a RAW can be found, then if a RAW cannot be found, sorry, they can just sort of populate the institution field with free text. And then at the production stage, we use RAW's REST API to introduce missing RAW IDs for all affiliations. So we use the presence of RAWs as well to also validate that information within affiliations. So for example, if the country in the affiliation differs to the country that's in the RAW record, then that will be flagged and somebody will check that prior to publication. This is a screenshot of our internal JATS XML validation tool. For those unfamiliar, JATS is the industry standard format for journal articles. And the screenshot illustrates this validator flagging a missing RAW ID after it has queried the RAW API, and then also flagging that the institution name for an affiliation is not the same as it is at RAW. Okay. Yes. So persistent identifiers for funding. Similarly, we capture structured funding data in our submission system as well. Last year, we transitioned from using Open Funder Registry IDs for funders to using RAW IDs. Our submission system still sort of captures a mixture of these at the moment. And during the production phase, we translate from one PID to the other to make sure that we always have a RAW ID where we can. In addition, we also collect and introduce grant DOIs for funding. So we make use of Crossref's grant linking system. Again, we collect these from authors in our submission system, but also during the production process, We match funders' internal grant numbers to registered grant DOIs, and these matches are confirmed by a team member before being included and published. So this, excuse me, these screenshots show examples from 2 papers where we've included a grant DOI rather than a grant number in the funding information. Users can click the link to be taken to a landing page containing more information about the grant, who it was awarded to, how much it was, and so on. So yeah, we feel that has many obvious sort of benefits in terms of transparency. And of course, the relationship between the 2 records can be made available in cross-ref metadata, but also in other downstream services like OA switchboard and so on. So one of the issues we face with funding information is that grant numbers are quite messy. So this is one of the problems that grant DOIs intends to solve, but not every funder registers DOIs, and those that do register their metadata, they register it with grant numbers that don't exactly match perhaps what the authors provide to us. So at the top, you can see a grant number that the authors provided in our submission system. This is the number that's passed to us in production. At the bottom, you can see the grant number that the funder provided to Crossref when they were registering the grant DOIs, and they're not an exact match. So we're able to match this because we know about this convention and the discrepancy. So, here we just compare the content before the sort of / and capital Z. But obviously each funder has its own set of practices and conventions. So, in order to aid matching, we've implemented a set of rules to attempt matches for a series of funders based on the data that they've already submitted to Crossref and the conventions that we have seen in grant numbers in their published papers. But, we're taking a tentative approach in order to avoid the possibility of incorrectly matching a grant DOI. So that's something we definitely want to avoid. But we have to take a bit of a sort of fuzzy approach, and then somebody needs to confirm that match. Okay, and then just a brief overview of some of the sort of metadata adjacent research integrity processes we carry out. So, at pre-publication, we use similarity check to flag plagiarism. We carry out various different image, bits of image screening. When submitting to eLife, authors are encouraged to use a tool called SciScore, which automatically evaluates their paper for rigor and reproducibility. We make use of another tool called PaperPal Preflight that automatically checks for authorship issues and reference issues, potential signs of AI-generated text, and so on. We carry out further kind of submission checks to do with ethics, transparent reporting, authorship, and so on. At the post-publication stage, like any responsible publisher, we issue correction notices, retraction notices, expression of concern notices where that's appropriate. We publish new versions of articles to correct sort of minor issues, and our site allows users to add online annotations to papers. And we actively respond to issues that are flagged in discussions at places like PubPeer and journal and preprint clubs and so on. So I think that was the main things I was going to cover. So look forward to seeing the questions in the Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fred. We do have quite a few questions in the Q&A, but first I do want to thank all of our presenters today for your excellent presentations. You've definitely given us a lot to think about. I also want to share a couple of links in the chat with everyone. Again, this is the video that Yvonne had mentioned at the top of the session about connecting the building blocks of research. And then we are also hosting another version of this session in a couple of weeks focused more on institutions. So the registration link is there for you if you'd like to join us in that session. And while you all are gathering your thoughts and getting ready to submit questions for our speakers, I'm also going to launch another quick poll just to see what you took away from the session and what your thoughts are after hearing everybody's presentations. But Yvonne, we have quite a few questions in the Q&A. If you want to go ahead and kick us off.
Thank you, Kimberly. I'll speak slowly to give people the opportunity to do the poll. And I also want to thank the speakers. That was amazing to see the illustrations, see the examples, see what you're doing. There are indeed quite a few questions, and we also I have some myself also. But let's start off with a definition question. It's nice that that is the first one. A question actually to all three of you. There's a question about what is metadata, and I think that's not trivial. Metadata and persistent identifiers, these words are often used interchangeably and used a lot also in your presentations. So maybe in reverse order, Fred, Christian, Carolina, can you explain how you see the difference and the relevance of metadata versus PIDs?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think for different people, there are different fields. That's why different organizations, or partly why different organizations have different schemas. So, for example, some people would consider an abstract metadata, and some people would consider that content. I think I don't want to increase the scope of it, but I think everything should be in scope for being sort of metadata to some extent. And I think that the trends towards sort of AI, for example, could lead us in that direction as well. You could see where the entire article itself can be considered to be metadata, or could be used as an input to create metadata. So I think everything is in scope, really.
Thanks, Fred. Do you want to add to that or have a different opinion, Christian?
Not necessarily, just that maybe PIDs are a certain subgroup of metadata, which so basically you have a curated item that someone else is taking care of, that it will provide you the correct information about something. So an affiliation string will maybe expire, or the affiliation somehow changes, or the name of the institution or stuff like this. And for example, a raw ID will always lead you to this institution, no matter how the name actually is. As well as a DOI will always lead you to a digital resource, no matter the internet URL or something like that. So, yeah.
Thank you, Christian. And Carolina?
I tend to agree with that. I usually would think of metadata as pretty much anything. To build on Fred's example, we consider abstracts metadata, right? I think a PID is just anything that's standardized. So if you have an ORCID ID, that's always going to have that like specific format for an ORCID, right? So it's always going to have that specific string. And yeah, I think that's kind of it.
Right. Thank you all. Back to the question from David Giaretta. He is a bit concerned by saying it's a problem that it's a bit too vague if metadata are not defined. The question back to three of you. I think you all three said metadata could be anything, might be different opinions. The abstract example is a good example. Do you think it's an issue? Question to all three, that it's not universally defined. What is metadata, Carolina? And I'll start with you.
Not necessarily. I think as long as, for that, as long as it's defined for that specific context, I think it's okay to use different definitions, I guess.
Christian?
Yeah, I would totally agree to this. And yeah, requirements may change, so that all this data science, data mining stuff sets new rules for metadata or new interests, what might be interesting metadata and stuff like this. So this is ever evolving, and yeah, as long as you have a definition or a schema or whatsoever, you can always use this and serve this. So
Great. Thanks, Christian. And Fred?
Yeah, I suppose, for the most part, it is dictated by what people consider to be useful or interesting information, right? So, as you've seen from the presentations, often a great deal of effort goes into capturing what we define as metadata. And so, organizations will have to make a choice about whether that effort is necessary based on the metadata they're capturing. So, if you yourself come up with some field that you think is interesting metadata, but you don't have a sort of compelling case to take that to others, then perhaps that isn't sort of useful metadata. It may still be metadata, but it might not be useful or actionable for the others. So I think the main thing, and sort of going back to some of the points around PIDs, is something that is machine readable and that you can relate to other pieces of metadata tends to be the stuff that most people are interested in. So I think those are the kind of bits of low-hanging fruit that would be kind of, this is certainly metadata that is interesting and useful, whereas, something else that I've just sort of come up by myself with may not be useful. Sorry, a bit of a
Thanks,
rambling
Fred.
answer.
No, I think it's really good. David, if you have further specifics, please put in another question in the chat. The next one follows nicely. Provenance. Some of you used the word already. Mostly you mean things useful to finding information, but you also need to think seriously about the details of provenance, which can be extremely complex in scientific data, and of course, how to use the information for reproducibility, replicability. Let's start with Christian this time. Do you want to?
Yeah, I was the one who didn't use the word provenance.
Oh, why not? Why
So
not?
I am. But I mentioned in one of my last slides that it's not always easy to attribute the research output to certain persons or unambiguously. So
Yeah.
there are some, I don't know, some ORCID IDs, emails, or whatever, but these are not necessarily things that one person has only one of. This actually, this is probably not supposed what ORCID, or it is not what ORCID is supposed to be used, but we do have authors that use multiple ORCID IDs, and that's what I meant with that. The technical solutions will not suffice. You will need to have human interaction and stuff up integrity departments because these are very complex things. So if everything is clear, fine, super. But if doubts are raised about provenance, about integrity, research integrity, you need to carefully look at stuff. And I think that you cannot rely on technical solutions only to this, but they can be helpful. Let's put it this way. Yeah.
Thank you, Christian. And thanks for bringing in the human element. I think that comes somewhere down the line also. But back to provenance, Carolina, you then used the word. I have heard it. Now, can you respond to this question, the challenge about the provenance and complexity in our area?
I think more specifically on preprints, they have versioning, which is great and is really helpful in that regard. But I feel like not all authors understand that they can do that, and that's why you want to post preprints, right? And oops, sorry, I just dropped something. And also, it's important to make sure that if you have a preprint posted, then this information is tagged in the XML file in the version of record so that everything can be linked together. Crossref will kind of let you know when they track a DOI for an article that matches a preprint that you've posted, so you can kind of update that record. But yeah, I think that's it. Because if you're a reader or a researcher and you're looking through these versions, it kind of helps you make informed decisions, I guess, in a way. So you can look through the versions and you can see what's been improved, what was the original version and what has been changing and evolving throughout the revisions. I think that's it.
Thank you, Carolina. Fred, your view on provenance and the challenges?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have too much to add other than to sort of agree that there are a great deal of sort of challenges involved in that question. So yeah, it takes a lot of effort, and a great deal of time and effort has been spent by many people to try to solve this problem. I don't think we're there by any means. Yeah.
Thank you, Fred. There is a specific question to you, Christian. I don't know if you can read it, but maybe for the audience, an impressive effort that Beilstein does on quality assurance. One question and one comment for you. The question is, do you encourage authors to cite data in the reference list, which would introduce them in the credit system? And a comment if you're aware of the CCDC repository issuing data site DOIs.
Basically, we are encouraging authors to cite data repositories in a data availability statement. if I understood the question
Mhm.
right. Yeah, so this was an effort to remove this thing from the references section and to make it explicitly into the data availability statement and to extract it from there and to make it a machine readable part of the article metadata, and which Crossref has its own relationships to it. I think is cited, no, is supported by and supports, I don't remember correctly, but this is really a different linkage between the article and the data repository than just having it in the references section. So we strongly encourage people to put this into the data availability statement, and that's why we made this effort in our data availability statement to check the DOI there. I hope
Very
this
clear answer.
answers the
Yeah,
question.
I think it
Okay.
does. Do you encourage them to put it in the reference list or not? The answer is no. You want them to put it in the data availability statement. And then a comment if you are aware of CCDC.
Sounds like this crystallographic thing. Let's see. Yeah, structural chemistry data. Yeah, this I think they have DOI, so something like this. This would work perfectly with yeah, with our data availability statement.
Okay.
If I
In
got
the
this
interest of
correct.
time. Yeah, I think maybe too much detail for here, so maybe it's an anonymous attendee if they want to
Okay.
speak to Christian about that to follow up outside the webinar, I would say. And then question from Wendy Patterson from the Baalstein Institute to Fred. You mentioned that you collect ORCIDs for editors. This is a wonderful idea to improve transparency and research integrity. Is the editor ORCID in the article metadata as well? And if so, who accepts this metadata or who do you deliver it to?
Yeah. So we capture it in the JAX XML. We deliver that to places that can accept it. So, PubMed, for example, will accept it. I think OE Switchboard takes that information. Oh, not sure off the top of my
I
head.
see it. I'm not sure how we treat it, but I know we get it. Yes.
Yeah. So since we also register DOIs for our peer reviews that are publicly posted, and editors are the sort of author of the eLife assessment, they're also recorded there as with their ORCID ID as the author of the eLife assessment, if that makes sense. I'm trying to think where else accepts it. It's a good point. I think those might be the only ones I can think of off the top of my head, but there may be others. We would obviously want to send it to as many places as possible. So, yeah.
Thank you, Fred. Then there is a question from Engzek Surendef. How can open metadata infrastructure help emerging regions like Mongolia build more visible and trusted research ecosystems? That's a question, I think, to all of you. Carolina, can we start with you?
Sure. I think, just collecting it, it is a lot of effort, I guess, in some ways, and specifically if you have less infrastructure, generally speaking, to collect all this information and to make sure that authors understand why it's important. And it is a shared responsibility in the end. Authors need to understand that they also benefit from having this information properly laid out and everything's public and visible. I think it helps with discoverability also. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question correctly, but I think it helps with discoverability and also making sure you're indexed in open access bases such as OpenAlex and things like that, I think.
Well, thank you, Caroline. I think the question is specifically if emerging regions, if metadata can help them specifically to build more visibility and trusted research ecosystem. So maybe, Fred, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Shiv, do you want to?
No, you go ahead, Fred. But I was hoping this might be a good opportunity for our colleague Paloma to also
Oh, excellent.
about
Yes.
ORCID consortia and how those are set up
Yeah.
in these regions. But Fred, if you want to speak first, maybe, and then Paloma can pick up on this.
No, go ahead, Paloma, please.
So, absolutely. Well, in the case of developing regions in general, what we've been seeing is that contributing metadata to ORCID and also reading metadata from ORCID has helped a lot in terms of research information infrastructure enhancement. And we don't have any participation in Mongolia precisely at the moment, but we've been seeing that in different areas in the surroundings. For example, we got a project recently with the open access Nepal infrastructure, and that worked actually very well in the consideration of metadata, preprints, as well as Carolina has been mentioning during her presentation as well. So this has helped visibility in general lines. So hopefully this can cover a bit the answer.
Thank you, Paloma. And in the interest of time, I have a last question for all of you, and also Shiv and Paloma, feel free to jump in. We had a question, it's not in the Q&A, it was number 2 in our list. We often catch metadata errors after a paper is flagged. From your perspective, what does a truly proactive workflow look like? And have you seen specific strategies successfully stop integrity issues before they reach the publication stage? And I think that might be a nice question for all of you to do a final. So who wants to go first? Truly best practice, proactive, and preventing research integrity issues.
So maybe I can say from the ORCID perspective, ORCID's role is to actually surface the metadata to allow decision makers to make a more informed decision about submissions in the publishing context, at least. We, as I say, provide the provenance of every item added to the ORCID record, and it's those trust markers that have been added through the member API by publishers, by funders, by institutions, and so on, that can help those decision makers, such as editors, make an informed decision and help with those research integrity checks at the point of submission. ORCID have made it easier for decision makers to view those trust markers in the user interface, but also they can be pulled through the member API into other systems. And we've also recently created the ORCID record summary to help it make it easier for those decision makers to see the number of trusted items that have been added by member organizations versus self-assertions, how long the researchers held an ORCID record for, and all of this data can be pulled into those decision-making workflows in many of these sort of research integrity checking systems that publishers are now starting to use and that are now being provided by submission system vendors as well. And I'll defer to the publishers to speak about their specific processes and checks that they are planning to implement or that they already use.
Yeah, last remarks, we don't have a lot of time, but it would be great to hear from all of you in the final remark on proactivity and what can prevent.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, like from our perspective, obviously there are loads of sort of activities that you could undertake. I think, trying to increase transparency where you can, whether that be in sort of peer review or publication or various different sort of processes, I think that is always helpful in terms of tackling sort of research integrity issues. I think there's quite a good sort of correlation between open sort of transparent practices and good practice, good open science practice.
Thanks, Fred.
Yeah, if I may continue, yeah, as I mentioned before, the cooperation between human and technology. This one needs the other, and make people aware of that, the editors, whoever, what are the issues, the current issues with research integrity. They are apparently moving a bit and stuff like this. Stay informed, inform other people, and give them the best tools that you can have, or something like that.
Excellent. Christian and Carolina?
Yeah, I too, I think keeping a human in the loop is always important. There always has to be someone validating. You can use, I guess, nowadays you can use AI to do some checks for you and all that, but you do need a human to validate that is correct, right? And we use ORCID a lot for that. As I mentioned previously, we use ORCID to help with moderation. So we look through an author's history, and we kind of see what journals they have been publishing in, what kind of things they have been publishing in. Because if an author has been publishing, has a career as a researcher in the life sciences, and suddenly they decide to publish a paper on, I don't know, geology. I guess geology is a life science, but if they're trying to do something that's very different from what they've been doing before, that kind of raises a flag, right? So I think that's kind of the way we're going with that.
Excellent. I think it's all coming together, Kimberly. We're at the hour, top of the hour. Is there any final remark from ORCID or the organizers? I want to thank everybody. It's been hugely inspirational and a lot of best practices shared. But Kimberly, do I hand it over to you?
Yes, thank you. I echo your sentiments there. I do want to thank our speakers and thank everyone for joining us and for making such an engaging Q&A session. And we hope to see you at our session in early June where we talk about metadata for institutions. And I hope to see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.